reports of his picks for key posts are beginning to emerge. Topping the list, Marco Rubio, whose sources say Trump is likely to tap for the role of Secretary of State. Well, when it comes to policies in the Middle East region, where I am, we still don't know what Donald Trump wants to do when he assumes office. What we do know is that he says he wants to bring peace. How he plans to achieve that is still unclear. Over the next 2.5 months, it will, one assumes, become clearer, and we are already seeing key positioning from stakeholders in the region who would be key partners for any deal of the century, as Trump liked to call it, peace in this region. Saudi Arabia, for starters, a country that was on the cusp of normalisation with Israel before the October 7th attacks and the ensuing bombardment of Gaza. Normalisation, a key priority for the Trump administration. Of course, the kingdom has most recently said no normalisation without a Palestinian state, or at least a credible path towards an independent state. And that reality, well, it does seem as if it is becoming less and less real. Just yesterday, Israel's new foreign minister, Gideon Saar, was asked about the possibility of a Palestinian state and, in a word, replied no, saying it would pose a security threat to Israel. And at a high-profile meeting in Riyadh on Monday, Saudi's Crown Prince gave one of his harshest criticisms since the war started, accusing Israel of genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. All of this as Israel's far-right finance minister orders preparations for the annexation of settlements in the occupied West Bank, stressing that Trump's victory brings what he calls an important opportunity for Israel. Right, we've laid the table. Let's look to see what we can do with what is on there. Alan Pinkas is an Israeli diplomat, and Trita Parsi, an expert on US-Iranian relations, author of Losing an Enemy. It's good to have you both. Trita, let me start with you. What should we take out of the meeting in Riyadh yesterday?
I think it's a very strong indication of where some of the Arab states in the Persian Gulf are leaning towards. The analysis among some of the hawks in the Trump circle is that they can go back to the situation in 2016 and 2017, where they laid the groundwork for some form of an Arab-Israeli alliance against Iran, which the Arabs at the time were quite in favor of. Things have changed, however. At this point, it's very clear both the Saudis and the Emiratis want to make sure that they absolutely stay out of any war that involves the United States, Israel, and Iran. And part of the reason for this, of course, is the anger amongst their own populations with what Israel has been doing in Gaza and the West Bank and increasingly in Lebanon, but also because of realization that Iran's ballistic missiles are so effective that they penetrated Israel's many layers of air defenses, and as a result will also be able to penetrate whatever the United States has provided these countries. So they're much more vulnerable vis-a-vis Iran as well than what they thought they were back in 2016. All of this is adding to their desire to stay out of any type of a conflict and help de-escalate the situation.
I want to come very specifically to where you believe Iran's sort of thinking is at present, of course, represented at this meeting in Riyadh. And that is a change since 2016. And of course, the first Trump administration. The region has changed significantly. The architecture moving around since the last time that Donald Trump was in power. Let's hold that thought just for the time being. Alon, let me bring you in. On the Israeli side, and this is, I'm quoting Faisal Abbas here, who writes for Arab News, and I thought it was a very good line. On the Israeli side, given what we've just heard Trita say, Benjamin Netanyahu's hard-right coalition and battlefield successes, Faisal says, are hindering any sort of apparent opportunity for compromise at this point. Would you agree with that, given what we are hearing from his appointees, his finance minister across settlements, and indeed from his foreign minister? A one-word answer when asked about a Palestinian state, the answer was no.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And, you know, it sounds very catchy to say no. But if there was a follow-up question of, well, what then do you propose? You will get nothing because they have nothing. And that's probably the tragedy of it. On the one hand, you have the finance minister, whom you mentioned several times. And he's a right-wing fanatic. He's driven by biblical dictates and all kinds of theological messianism, pretending to be policy. On the other hand, you have Mr. Netanyahu, who's not exactly a religious messianic, but he's become a geopolitical messianic. He thinks he can actually topple the regime in Iran. He thought so, by the way, in 2002 when he advocated that the U.S. Invade Iraq because that would reverberate, quote unquote, in the region and bring about the fall of Iran. His dream, his geopolitical ideal scenario for the last year was to drag the U.S. into a war with Iran. I doubt that would happen under Donald Trump. So both these gentlemen, Mr. Smotrich wants to annex the West Bank because the Bible says so, and Mr. Netanyahu wants to bring about a regime change in Tehran. Both may be disappointed with what they'll see coming out of the Trump White House.
And how significant is this leverage that the Saudis hold over sort of, what happens next with regard normalization? I mean, the Saudis have made it very, very clear at this point, without a credible path to an independent Palestinian state, there will be no normalization. Look, nobody's prepared to say what that credible path might look like, but Tehran must be, this is sort of music to the ears of Tehran to a certain extent, who clearly not looking for a normalized region with Israel anytime soon. So let's just have a go at that. How much leverage did the Saudis hold? Alon, to your mind first.
I think they hold tremendous leverage over Trump. I think it's a mistake. I mean, you said that in your introduction, and that was the conventional wisdom before October 7th, 2023, according to which there was a trilateral deal in the works. A U.S.-Saudi defense alliance and a Saudi-Israeli normalization, with no one giving a damn about the Palestinian issue. Okay, I'm not sure that would have worked, but it doesn't matter. It's all academic now because October 7th occurred, and the ensuing war, and the Saudis cannot go back to October 6th just because Donald Trump is going to ask them. Now, this is how it's going to play out. I won't take too much of Trita's time. Trump is going to come to the Saudis and say, join the Abraham Accords. Let's expand this. Let's create a regional loose alliance, even though he's averse to alliances. But this is what he's going to say, because that shows that he's doing something that Biden failed to do. The Saudis are going to say, okay, Mr. President, we're all ready for this, provided that the Israelis show us, as you said, Becky, a clear path to a Palestinian state. Trump is going to go to Netanyahu, who's going to say, not a problem. I'll take care of that. Don't worry about that. We'll start a process. Trump will then say, I'm good with that, right? He's going to go back to the Saudis, and the Saudis are going to say, absolutely not. Mr. President, Netanyahu has been manipulating American presidents for the better part of the last 20 years. He's going to manipulate you. Unless we see clear, tangible signs of such a process, we're not going to participate in this game. And their leverage over Trump, because he's transactional, right, because of the oil, is much greater than Israel.
Yep, fascinating. I want to bring you in, Trita, then. What's the strategic calculus here for Iran? After all, back in from the cold with the Saudis and the UAE, for example, warmer relations, but keep your friends close and your enemies closer, is clearly, the sort of strategic calculus potentially from this region. So what's the thinking in Tehran at this point?
I think the first thing the Iranians are concerned about at this point is to see exactly what type of an Iran policy the new Trump administration will adopt. As you know, the Iranians, particularly the new president, came in with a very strong desire of restarting negotiations with the United States. They amended some of their positions, added greater flexibility, agreeing to make a deal with the U.S. directly, even with Trump, that doesn't necessarily build off of the JCPOA or is identical to the JCPOA. But then Trump has come in, and I think they're looking at it very nervously. On the one hand, they recognize that Trump actually wants a deal. The question is, will he have a team around him that will help ensure that a deal is secured, or will it be like it was last time, where he had a team around him that actually pursued a policy that was far more likely and designed to bring about a military confrontation between the United States and Iran, and essentially duped Trump into that direction? So the nervousness on the Iranian side is whether Trump actually is capable of coming to a deal, depending on who he is appointing. And some of the decisions that were made yesterday, I'm sure, has made the Iranians more nervous, with names such as Rubio, etc.